I'm really pleased and honored to have two very distinguished scholars at the Institute of Regional Studies to delve upon the pertinent subject of emerging technologies and the future of warfare in South Asia. The speedy integration of these technologies is really impacting the changing dynamics of future warfare. So with this brief introduction, I invite President IRIS, Ambassador Johar Salim Saab, to give his welcome remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. The torrential rain that we are having has really disrupted life in many ways in the Twin Cities. We had otherwise a great interest in this subject, but it's a pleasure and a privilege for us to have amongst us Dr. Adel Sultan and virtually Dr. Naeem Salik. Dr. Adel Sultan needs no introduction. His association with their university at the highest echelons is quite well known, and his expertise in this area also needs no introduction. As Humaira has mentioned, the emerging technologies are changing the landscape of the state of science in the world. We are at the cusp of what could be called the fourth or fifth technological revolution. The pre-industrial revolution, the industrial revolution, and then in the 20th century, we witnessed another one. At the end of the 20th century and the beginning of 21st century, the IT revolution or the ICT revolution. And now the AI or the artificial intelligence. These have been all game changers, and artificial intelligence would be another game changer. In fact, some analysts are touting it as possibly and potentially the biggest game changer ever. So what we see is the impact of this changing landscape on warfare as well, in general, and in particular in our region. The recent conflict that took place between Pakistan and India was a clear manifestation of that. This war, which luckily was short-lived, was entirely different than any of the wars that Pakistan and India had. We have had traditional wars, the likes of which the world had seen in the Second World War and subsequently in Korea, Vietnam, many other countries. But this conflict was in many ways like a sci-fi movie. The planes, we saw the biggest air battle in this region, where we had almost 200 planes in the sky. But the planes stayed in their own countries. And the fight was taking place literally like 100 kilometers away from each other. Similarly, the missiles that was being fired, the drones, the cyber attacks, it was all unprecedented. Quite clearly, the emerging technologies have had a great deal of impact on how wars would be fought, hopefully not in this region, but given the state of tension, given the hostility in the region, if the core issues are not resolved, like the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, then of course there could be military conflicts in future. And given that these technologies could make wars very different, but also much more devastating, and I'm not talking of a nuclear war, I'm talking of conventional weaponry, the use of conventional weapons, but in an entirely different way. So that is what we are going to discuss here today. There is an imbalance in South Asia, as we know. India has a military budget of about $85 billion. Pakistan's military budget is around $10 billion. India's access to modern technologies from everywhere in the world is much greater because of their perceived role in the so-called Indo-Pacific strategy. They have access to some of the most sophisticated technologies being produced in the West. On the other hand, Pakistan does not have that good fortune. But we have our great friend, our all-weather strategic cooperative partner, China, which has been a mainstay of our defense production, of our defense equipment needs. And China, as this recent conflict demonstrated quite unequivocally, is also at the cusp of some of the most sophisticated technologies in the world. If anything, what this conflict proved was that India, despite all the resources at its hands, was not able to achieve any of its military objectives. Pakistan's adequate and befitting response, what is being termed as the quid pro quo plus, changed the entire geo-strategic scenario, and the ramifications are still being felt. But in terms of how the emerging technologies would play out in the future of security in this region, we have some great experts with us today. And like you all, I'm very keen to have the benefit of their insight and their perspective. So without further ado, I would hand over the floor to Dr. Adel Sultan.
Sir, thank you very much for the invitation and giving me this opportunity. I know it's a bit taxing. Certainly, abhi channel switch hoga कि US foreign policy पे you had a very extensive session, and now we are moving towards fictional world. For researchers, जो silent community normally यहाँ पर होती है, उनके लिए बड़ा taxing होता है to maintain that level of attention. So I'll try as far as possible to make it interesting. So what I'm going to do is just my perspective of how these emerging technologies are likely to impact the future of warfare. Not everything might be true. We keep predicting, but things do not happen as we envisage most of the times. And there could be many more technologies in 5 years, 10 years time that we are not thinking. So those could also play a major role. So just giving you introduction about these technologies, and I'm not a technical expert, so I'm looking at these technologies from a social scientist perspective, how these technologies or concepts could influence the future of warfare. So I'll focus briefly on artificial intelligence, AI integrated drones, quantum computing, space and cyberspace, and then we'll come to why it matters and what needs to be done, in my view. First, we talk about artificial intelligence. It is an enabling technology. It is not a technology by itself. You integrate these technologies into various systems, and then only you can have the impact. So it is being used in various platforms and all domains of warfare: land, air, sea, or nuclear. So whatever you take, so artificial intelligence is being used or will be used in the future. These systems, artificially intelligence integrated systems, can make military systems more efficient, reduce the reaction time for decisions, but at the same time complicate the OODA loop, the traditional military observe, orient, decide and act loop, if both sides are using the same kind of tools or integrating AI into the military systems. Integration of artificial intelligence into nuclear command and control could be beneficial as well as counterproductive. Beneficial in a way that it can provide the decision makers assessment in a relatively shorter time, and then the decision makers can have that time for deciding what to do. So in that sense, but if you allow algorithms to take decisions on their own when the nuclear weapons have to be fired, then it becomes very destabilizing. Regulation of artificial intelligence is problematic because there are many non-state actors, private entities, they are involved into this business. And the developed countries, they don't want to be regulated by new norms which can impede their future developments. Second is, can we move to next slide? Cyberspace. The use of cyberspace can make military systems more efficient as well as vulnerable to adversaries' disruptive acts if the adversary wants to use this cyberspace for disruption. Cyberspace has made geographical distances less relevant and battlefields more transparent. Anybody sitting in United States can fight wars in Afghanistan or Iraq or any part of the world. The battlefield commanders do not necessarily have to be present in the battlefield. So this is how it can help the decision makers or the future battles. Attribution and accountability remains a major challenge. Who did what? Cyber, you can do anything with a laptop sitting anywhere in the world. So it becomes a major challenge. Once you combine artificial intelligence and cyber, so you are moving towards hyper wars. That means less human involvement in the future wars. Cyberspace has been effectively used for disinformation and misinformation. We have all seen the impact in our own country as well and other parts of the world. Similar to artificial intelligence, the regulation of cyberspace also becomes difficult because there are private entities, individuals involved, or technologically developed countries. They don't want to be regulated again. And that's why we do not have kind of norms or treaties or arrangements at the UN level or the international level because of these reservations by countries and also the influence of private entities who are the major players these days. Then comes the quantum. We talk less in Pakistan, but this is something very futuristic, and many countries are working on it, developed countries especially. It has not been operationalized or integrated in the military systems as yet, but it has lots of potential. It can fast track the ongoing AI revolution. Integration of quantum technology into military systems can have multiple effects, like it can make the GPS-based navigation system redundant or obsolete because will no longer be dependent on those satellites. And the quantum technology, you can have this autonomous navigation system, so you are free from spoofing or interruption, and you can have that kind of advantage over the adversary. So if you can see everything, you can navigate, you can reach everywhere, and you can at the same time disrupt adversaries' platforms and their navigation system. Half of the battle is already won. In terms of communication, if you use quantum technology, you can secure your communication systems. At the same time, you will have the power to disrupt the communication system of the adversary. So India-Pakistan war, we have seen a couple of minutes disruption. What difference can it make? So if that technology gives that kind of advantage to you, so again, you are at an advantageous position. It can increase security of your own cyber systems if you are incorporating quantum technology. At the same time, it allows you to disrupt adversary cyber systems. So that's the benefits of quantum technology. Finally, it can make the oceans, the radars that the developed countries, the advanced countries are working, it can make oceans transparent. That means the future satellites equipped with these sensors, they would be able to see submarines submerged under the sea. So if they are able to achieve that kind of capability, then the whole concept of second strike capability, because it rests on this unpredictability and its ability to remain underwater and not be seen. So if these radars can do that, so imagine the countries that are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in acquiring this capability or second strike capability, even Pakistan. So if 20 years now, if your adversaries, they have these kind of sensors, would it be rational to proceed in that direction or find some other alternate solution? I'm not saying that this is into consideration. Then we move on to drones. आज बारिश है तो drones जहन के अंदर है, ठीक है ना? और मैं sorry तेज भी इसलिए चल रहा हूँ कि I know कि we started late and there would be pressure to finish off early. My apologies for that. So drones, AI integrated drones can change the future of warfare. In air, we have seen between India and Pakistan, between Ukraine-Russia war, Israel in Gaza conflict, we have seen how drones are being used, miniature from the smallest kind of drone to advanced level of drones. So there's another concept of collaborative combat aircraft, which is in simple words also a drone. You can acquire a CCA, which United States is working, and they are in trials for maybe a couple of millions dollars, say $10 million or so. So if F-35 costs around $100 million, and you can have these multiple CCAs for a couple of dollars, like $1 million, like $7, $8, $10 million, and they could be integrated with a manned machine or manned aerial platform or fighter aircraft. So the advantage that you can have, you have multiplied your air force at a relatively less cost, and you can send these CCAs in a highly defended environment where your pilot at least would not be lost, or $100 million of F-35, or in future if we acquire J-35, वो भी सस्ता नहीं है, $60-70 million का तो वो भी आएगा. So that's the cost. It becomes more affordable to send those CCAs controlled by the airborne manned aircraft and to a highly defended environment and achieve your objectives. Undersea drones, that's a new phenomenon. Again, there are many countries working on it. India and United States, even private company, Mahindra Corporation and United States, now they have started to do research. So that's the kind of utility. So if you can have undersea drones, the submarines that can create that chaos or havoc for ships, you can have in a relatively lesser cost by having these undersea drones, AI integrated drones. And they can go deeper also, and they're relatively cheaper. Then on the land, we have seen in Russia-Ukraine war, a commercially available drone of a couple of $100, $1 or $2 million का tank है, उसको hit कर देता है, and Russians couldn't do anything. In the end, they had to retreat their armored. So that's the future of warfare. कि वो जो पहले होता था कि जी tanks जिसके पास ज़्यादा है, या aircraft जिसके पास ज़्यादा है, या ships जिसके पास ज़्यादा है. So these technologies are making that kind of a difference, that relatively lesser investment, you can achieve those military objectives if you want to invest in this. Commercially available drones have increased the utility for state as well as non-state actors. The terrorists, they can probably use these drones to achieve certain political objectives and create chaos, जो उनका एक objective होता है. Imagine somebody in Kashmir does this to Indian forces, and you don't know who has done this. So crisis एक trigger कर लिया. अफगानिस्तान या तालिबान के बारे में भी अभी कुछ हो रहा है कि they are also we have seen some stories using drones. So that's where the accessibility, commercially available drones are there, and you just attach the conventional some उसके जो warheads है जो भी कहे उसको, तो you can at least threaten the others. Ukraine, just to give you an example, a relatively smaller country, of course, technologically advanced country, they're producing 3 to 3.5 million drones per year. Of course, because they need it to withstand Russia, a major power, a nuclear power, and EU or NATO countries are indirectly helping them. But they had the potential to launch 700 drones in a day. So one smaller country with limited resources, not a nuclear weapon state. So that's the capability, and we have seen, of course, Russia could jo bhi hai, we mostly hear the Western stories that Ukraine is probably causing a significant damage. They are causing a significant damage with those limited resources. So again, because of the technology. Swarm drones can make air defenses ineffective to an extent. We had seen in India-Pakistan conflict of May. They were not able to shoot down S-400 जो उनका है, लेकिन अगर वो करे भी तो S-400 cost millions of dollars. So if 500 या 1000 या डॉलर्स का अगर आप ड्रोन्स बनाते हैं, couple of $1,000 का भी, तो आप वो S-400 की जो मिसाइल बैटरीज हैं, जो ईच मिसाइल कॉस्ट सिग्निफिकेंट, आपको शायद पता हो, मुझे एग्जैक्ट कॉस्ट नहीं पता है, लेकिन relative cost is much higher. How many anti-missile systems can you use against these small drones? It would be ineffective first, it would be overkill, and you cannot sustain that. The cost of skill spend. And if you have swarm drones, no country can protect that. Even Israel का भी हमने देख लिया कि there's no foolproof air defense system. और ये जो drones वगैरह जो आजकल के हैं, commercially available miniature drones, swarm drones, you can't do that. So that's the potential of these drones against established powers. Now coming to space, it intersects all domains of warfare, that is land, air, at sea, and nuclear. Everything these days is connected to space. You cannot move without linking with the space. Space superiority can lead to control of battlefields. So वो एक मैकेंडर की एक हार्टलैंड की थ्योरी जो सोशल साइंटिस्ट कहें कि जी anybody who controls Eurasia would rule the world. So somebody coined this, not me, somebody who is proponent of space power, कि whoever will control the low Earth orbits will control the world. Now imagine Elon Musk controlling 50% of these low Earth orbit satellites, the kind of influence he has. And we had seen कि Starlink को जब उन्होंने वो किया, Ukraine को दिया था in support of their military. Now he's not doing it, but in future, if there are other non-state actors, private entities, they develop these technologies, या swarm drones बना रहे हैं, and they are renting out to conflict zone in Africa, Asia या कहीं पे, और इसी तरह से satellite का, तो commercialization of war, the private entities का influence उसके उस पे, already we have seen Elon Musk के साथ, the others are also doing it. Then space में militarization of space, ongoing moon rush, there are reportedly huge resources moon पे or other spatial bodies पे, where major powers, they want to control those resources. Private companies, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, yeah, Elon Musk, they're also sending rockets. They're not just sending it for nothing. So future के resources के हिसाब से, they are investing a lot in these space missions, जो moon rush जिसको हम कहते हैं. And whenever there is a conflict on resources, there could be possibility of presence of military bases as well. It is natural if United States find there are huge resources and they need to control, तो वो अपने जो भी उनका होगा infrastructure उसको secure करने के लिए, they might send military. So what if all countries start doing it? China, United States, Russia, and non-state actors. So there could be a conflict. Again, space के ऊपर, resources के उस पे. Do we need to worry? जो मैंने quickly जो run down किया, just in this backdrop, and as I said, I may not be corrected by predictions. These are just thoughts, and for you to think about it. Integration of emerging and disruptive technologies would make future conflicts more complex, intense and opaque, but also relatively affordable, thus providing incentive for states to engage in limited wars. जैसे सारी हमने बात की कि drones अगर आपके affordable हो जाते हैं, आप ये चीज़ें अगर require कर ले, CCAs कर लेते हैं, you don't have to buy F-35 या J-35 उसका. Yes, you can have fewer platforms, and likewise उसके साथ आप CCAs वगैरह करके, and still you can use for military objectives. So it becomes more affordable. Conflicts, wars, waging wars can become more affordable. India's fast-paced development in the field of emerging and disruptive technologies has increased the capability gap between India and Pakistan. How? Don't get influenced by what happened in the recent May conflict. this was a conflict. Yes, uska outcome favorable raha. Both sides are claiming victory, but we don't know how future is going to be. We should never undermine the adversity, especially keeping in view the capabilities or the support India has. For example, they have this bilateral arrangement initiative of creative and emerging technologies. So quantum, AI, cyber, space, ये सारा जो United States and India are collaborating. So अगर if these technologies were not used now, they might be used in the future. In February this year, they had this agreement compact. This is a acronym, ये जो लंबा सा एक phrase है, इसको आप पढ़ लें. ये 13 फरवरी को ये हुआ था, तो मैं इसको कहता हूँ कि ट्रम्प का वैलेंटाइन गिफ्ट था मोदी के लिए. सो इफ यू रीड दैट स्टेटमेंट, वो जो एग्रीमेंट अरेंजमेंट हुआ, सो उसी के अंदर महिंद्रा कॉर्पोरेशन एंड यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स एंटिटीज, प्राइवेट एंटिटीज नाउ डेवलपिंग अंडर वाटर ड्रोन्स. उसके अलावा एआई, साइबर और क्वांटम टेक्नोलॉजीज, collaboration in every field between India and United States. Then they are also likely to sign this framework for US-India major defense partnership in 21st century. Now, these arrangements are besides the agreements that they have, like BICA, Basic Exchange Cooperation Agreement, COMCAS, LIMO, Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Understanding between India and United States. The technologically India is being equipped by United States. If India has not built these capabilities now, they are likely to build in next 5-10 years for sure. And this is going to significantly impact Pakistan's security. Then introduction of hypersonic weapons. We have seen the use of hypersonic weapons, ASAT weapons, BMD systems, drones. ये सारा कुछ जो है, it also complicates our security context. What needs to be done? To fight the future wars that are likely to be multi-domain, as we had seen recently, there may be a need to revamp organizational structures. And once I say organizational structure, look at how these capabilities were used. Can you fight future wars with the same structures? Probably it would be quite difficult. Okay? And review the existing role of all the three services. This does not mean giving priority to one over other, but we need to rethink about कि जिस तरह से technologies हो रही हैं और किस तरह से future warfare होगी, उसमें you work on it. To deal with the complexities of future wars, there's a need to integrate data scientists, artificial intelligence and software engineers, quantum engineers, and others in the decision-making process. So on the decision-making table, it doesn't have to be the mainstream fighting. जैसे हम कहते हैं फोर्स के अंदर के फाइटर पायलट है वही लीड कर रहा होता है, या नेवी के अंदर भी इसी होगा, आर्मी के अंदर भी इस तरह फाइटिंग फोर्स वाले लीड कर रहे होते. आपको जब तक ये एआई साइंटिस्ट, डाटा साइंटिस्ट उस वक्त नहीं बताएंगे कि साइबर अटैक किस तरह से करना है, ये टेक्नोलॉजीज जो आ रही, स्वॉर्म ड्रोन से किस तरह से ऑपरेट हो रही है, हमारे काउंटर मेजर्स कैसे होंगे, you won't be able to employ these technologies. So you have to have this reorganization at the institutional level कि जहाँ पे ये जो आपके पास है asset, they should be on the decision making table कि how these technologies have to be integrated. So this is not war of 1950s or 60s कि जहाँ पे खाली जहाज या खाली ships या tanks आपको जो future में कर सकेंगे. We need to prioritize national resources and invest in critical emerging technologies for commercial as well as military applications through public-private partnerships. Ironically, हमारे एक model, good or bad, कि we focus more on military technologies, जिसका नुकसान ये होता है कि पहले हम उसका इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बनाते हैं, फिर उस पर काम करना शुरू करते हैं. By that time, technology is already 5, 10, 15 years ahead. इंडिया ने प्रोग्रेस कैसे किया था, उन्होंने कमर्शियल साइड को बहुत एडवांटेजेस दिए. कमर्शियल साइड पे जितनी डेवलपमेंट्स हो रही थी उससे आप डिविडेंड्स ले सकते हैं. यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स का भी यही मॉडल है. एलॉन मस्क, जेफ बेजोस जो सारा कुछ कर रहे हैं, अभी नासा इज कोलैबोरेटिंग विद एलॉन मस्क. सो दैट्स द फ्यूचर, बिकॉज आप जब गवर्नमेंट के पास इतने रिसोर्सेज नहीं है, आपकी मिलिट्री लेड आप करेंगे तो आपकी डेवलपमेंट उस तरह से नहीं होगी. बट इफ प्राइवेट एंटिटीज आर कमिंग for their own commercial interests, they will compete with the outside world and they will also be able to collaborate with the international institutions क्योंकि military के साथ collaboration मुश्किल होती है. If you don't follow this model, probably you will always be lagging कि आप उसको catch up कर रहे होंगे, which is very, very difficult. Thank you and sorry for being racy, sir, क्योंकि time मैंने close कर दिया.
Thank you so much, sir, for being so articulate. And you rightly pointed out that there would be many more complex technologies that would be very critical for the safety of regions. With this, Dr. Naeem Salik, I will be inviting you to speak on the subject. So the floor is all yours. I hope we are audible.
Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. I hope
Sir,
you can hear me.
mic आपका off है.
Can you hear me now?
No, sir, you're not audible.
Am I audible now?
No, sir, you're still not audible. Unmute करें जरा.
Unmute तो किया हुआ है.
कह रहे कि unmute किया हुआ है.
Can you hear me? On my side, the mic is unmuted. I'm sure
No,
you
sir,
should
we
be able
can't
to
hear
hear.
you.
Can you hear me now?
सर आप डिस्कनेक्ट करके दोबारा से लॉगिन कर लेंगे. थैंक यू सो मच.
Hello. Hello.
सर आपको फ़ोन पे ले लें व्हाट्सएप पे एंड वी कैन पुट यू ऑन स्पीकर.
Hope you can hear me now.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon and assalamu alaikum, everybody. My job actually has been made easy by Dr. Adel Sultan. He has uh, very well explained all these technologies and how they are being applied. So, what I am going to do is instead of explaining all these technologies, I will just focus on how these technologies are going to affect the future warfare. We have already seen in this recent war between India and Pakistan that it was basically a non-contact warfare, uh, where, as has been mentioned, also beyond visual range missiles were used, surface-to-air standoff weapons were employed, and as well as the cruise missiles and drones. And except for the line of control, there was no physical battle between the land forces. And given the nature of these technologies, the tempo of operations in the future war is going to be very high. And because these technologies are very costly, they are not going to be available in abundance. So the future conflicts are going to be short-lived with high tempo of exchanges of weapons and mostly standoff weapons being used. So as Dr. Adil was in his closing remarks mentioning that we need to rethink the configuration of our forces depending on their utility in the future battlefield. Uh, Secondly, these technologies are called emerging and disruptive technologies. Now, emerging, of course, is very clear, but why disruptive? Because the traditional concepts of nuclear deterrence, second strike capability, and strategic stability, they are going to be adversely affected once these technologies are used at a large scale. Let me give you a few examples. There was a mention of undersea drones. So the assured second strike capability, which we use to depend on the submerged submarines, that is going to be compromised with these transparent oceans and these underwater drones roaming around. Some of them reconnaissance drones, and some of them carrying weapons as well. So the second strike capability will come under threat. On the ground, we used to depend on mobile launchers. Now, with all these drones with long loitering times, staying in the air for almost 24 hours at a stretch, and so many of them, and add to that the concept of microsatellites, which can be launched in large numbers, there'll be hardly any respite. So even if you have mobile launchers and vehicles carrying strategic weapons moving around, they will be either observed by the drones or by the microsatellites. So there'll be no hiding place for these, and they could be accurately attacked anytime while even they are changing positions from to point A to point B. So that is why we say that these are going to be disruptive technologies. But another point to remember is that many of these technologies have not yet fully matured. It has happened in the past also that a lot of technologies were publicized with a lot of fanfare, but uh, at the end of the day, they failed to yield the desired results which were expected of them, or uh, while these technologies matured and became usable, the cost was so prohibitive that they could not be inducted in large numbers, and they were not therefore operationally very useful. So we have to keep all these factors in mind. We also have to remember that uh, throughout the annals of military history, there's never been a time that a weapon system made an appearance and it was not, a counter was not developed within a very short time. And that is exactly what is going to happen to these technologies also, because now they appear to be insurmountable. but very soon we are going to see the counter technologies emerging to neutralize the effect of some of these technologies. Some of the questions which were raised in the concept paper, like arms race cannot be avoided because other than the conventional arms race, the arms race will now find newer avenues. And obviously, every country is now trying to acquire these new technologies, and that race is bound to emerge. We know that there are three models of arms racing: action-reaction model, which has been operative between India and Pakistan for last 75, 80 years. Second is the domestic political model or the bureaucratic model. That is more applicable to countries like United States, where there's a nexus between the military-industrial complex, the Congress, the politicians, and other interest groups joining in, and then the large industrial entities competing with each other. We do not have that kind of a problem here. But the third one is the technological model. And on many occasions, we have seen that technology has driven the arms race. And that is what is now likely to happen. Now, in our case, we can be fascinated with these technologies, but we have to remember that without indigenous development capabilities, we cannot compete with the advanced countries in this field. We do not have the hardware, and we do not produce much of software which is used in these technologies. If you do not have your own algorithms, if you do not have the quantum computing capable high-speed computers, and if you import those items from abroad, then you will always remain vulnerable. And that vulnerability can cause a lot of problems at critical junctures in a conflict, particularly. These are very investment intensive technologies, and the leading countries in AI and quantum technology, they are China, America, and Russia, because they have the resources to invest heavily in these development of these technologies. And that is the reason that since few countries have access to these technologies, they do not want any kind of international regulatory mechanism. So they are developing at their own, both in the public as well as private sector. And it may be too late once the regulatory regime comes. The technology may already have bypassed those. These weapons, many of these weapons are what we can call the non-strategic, non-nuclear strategic weapons, because these are mainly non-nuclear weapons, but they have strategic effects, like the hypersonic cruise missiles, the standoff surface to air weapons. We have seen those being used in this recent conflict. The problem with these kind of weapons is that they're highly accurate and very effective. And there is always a temptation to use them for counter force missions. Sometimes they can be deliberately used to attack the other side's nuclear assets, and sometimes they can inadvertently hit those assets, strategic assets, while trying to target conventional assets. So the danger of inadvertent escalation is very high. And especially if there is a deliberate strike by these weapons against the strategic forces, the effect will be the same, and the reaction by that state would be as if there was a nuclear counterforce strike. So that's a very dangerous situation which is emerging, and we have seen that Indians attempted towards the end of the recent conflict to target some of the very sensitive air bases and sensitive targets in Pakistan, which could have created very serious problems. Another element which has actually come up in addition to these new technologies is the cost gain ratio. We have seen the use of these drones at a very large scale, first of all, in the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. They made a real impact there. In fact, they were the war-winning factor. But there was a very typical situation there because it was not a contested environment. The Armenians did not have very effective air defense system and they did not have an air force. So the drones played havoc with them. Then we have seen the use of drones in Russia-Ukraine conflict, where there has been the conflict has been progressing on both counts, contact war as well as the non-contact war. And as Dr. Adil was also mentioning, the scale and number of use of drones has been progressively increasing as people have found the uh, capability to produce those drones in large numbers. And that is one area where even middle powers are also competing. Countries like Turkey, countries like Iran, they are also producing very advanced drones, which are very cost effective. Now, the problem against the drones attack is that if you use your air defense missiles to shoot down a drone, the cost ratio is very unfavorable because you use a $500,000 worth of a missile to shoot down a drone which is maybe $10,000 worth. So that ratio is very unfavorable. So you cannot use these conventional air defense weapons against these drones. So the one area in which I think the development will now focus on, and we also need to think about it seriously, is development of counter drone weapons. There are many kinds of ideas available: the laser weapons, the microwave weapons, the uh, the electronic warfare methods against drones, which can utilize their communication links and their guidance systems. So we have to focus on these aspects also. But what we saw here is that although drones were used in India-Pakistan conflict, they did not play a very critical role. Why? Because it was a contested environment and many of the drones were shot down by the Air Force and many were shot down by the air defenses. Uh, so they could not play the kind of role they have played in Ukraine-Russia conflict or in the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. We have also seen the recent conflict between Iran and Israel. Uh, there, because of the geographical factor, it had to be a distant and non-contact warfare where long-range missiles were mainly used. So the whole complexion of future war is changing with the availability of these newer technologies. As I said, we have to think about the role of conventional forces, particularly land forces. And in these short-lived conflicts, the Navy also has to review its role. How can it play a role in a conflict which is very short-lived because naval forces take a bit of a time to come into action. And by the time the conflict would be over, in any case, in India-Pakistan conflicts, if you look at the history, the 65 war lasted for 17 days and the 71 war lasted for 13 days. The recent war lasted for just 4 days. And this is going to be the pattern for future warfare, 4 days, 6 days. And in that, we have to see which forces can play because the land forces take a week or two to mobilize fully. And similarly, naval forces take time to reach their war stations. So they have to also review their role. Uh, the Air Force, obviously, as we have seen in this conflict, is going to be the lead service in the future warfare and mostly using standoff weapons because of the hostile air defense environment and the long range air defense systems like S-400, etc., which are available in the region. The Air Force will also have to preserve its assets by staying out of the range of these air defense assets. So future conflict is going to be led by the standoff weapons, hypersonic cruise missiles, uh, unmanned combat air vehicles, beyond visual range systems, and the decision making will be compressed. If you depend on the AI, the decision making is going to be highly compressed, and it will provide a dilemma to the decision makers to depend on AI generated solutions and take action on that, because they will always be fearing that the other side is, since they are also using AI, they might act before us. So in a future conflict, both sides will having their fingers on the buttons to act before the other side can take you on. So it's going to be a very unstable environment where there'll be not much time for deliberate decision making, and given the accuracy and speed of these modern weapon systems, the chances of inadvertent escalation to the nuclear level is very high. And the nature of conflict, what we have observed in this is that it has shortened the nuclear fuse. Uh, Normally, we expected that there will be a crisis developing between the two countries, which will lead to a limited conventional conflict that will expand ultimately into a wide-ranging conventional war. And then at some stage, it will escalate to nuclear war. Once these lower levels have already been eliminated and you start from a very high baseline, then there's a very little distance between this kind of a conflict and escalation to the nuclear levels, which is a very, very dangerous situation. Uh, we have been talking about the limitations on warfare under the nuclear overhang. But we have seen the progressive increase in the nature of conflict. We saw the 2016 claim of land-based surgical strike. Then in 2019, there was the air-based surgical strike where only a small number of aircraft launched standoff weapons. And then this recent conflict in which uh, standoff weapons, beyond view range air-to-air missiles, drones, long-range artillery rocket systems, and the cruise missiles were used. So this has set a baseline for future conflict. So the future conflict is going to start with all these things which are already been used, and maybe something may be added to that. Uh, One thing we have to keep in mind is that this time the Indians did try to move their naval this carrier task force, but then they withdrew because of the threat they felt from the Pakistan Navy. Next time we might see some aggression coming from the maritime direction as well. So we have to be prepared for that also, particularly our shore installations and ports are vulnerable to this kind of standoff attack from the maritime direction as well. So I end here because I think we have already overshot our time, and now we will be available for the question answer session.
Thank you so much, sir, Dr. Naeem Salik, for such an informative insights on the subject. And you rightly pointed out that the new emerging technologies do have the potential of being disruptive. With this, I invite President to moderate the question and answer discussion round. Thank you.
Gee. First from the table. Should...
My name is
huge stocks of artillery ammunition. If you look it up, you can clearly said it very, very clearly. So this means that they are taking a very balanced approach to what are the emerging technologies. They're a long way off to be stable. Whatever their impact right now is because the people are improvising. So, as you said, we don't know how quickly they will affect us. I think we are very far off from having devastating effects of the emerging technologies. They will be slowly and slowly inducted into the regular military service. I mean, we're all in the military or we've got military background. You know how difficult it is to induct a new system, what sort of trials, regulations there. Most of these technologies do not give you the repeatability or the reliability that permits it as regular induction into any of the services. So I'm saying, this is my opinion. And I've got no question, everything is very clear to me. He's elucidated the technologies, I'm familiar with them. I fully agree with Dr. Salik's this thing. I was just reinforcing what I was saying.
Wonderful. Thanks for the comment. I think it was very useful. We would now move to EVM Faisal Saab.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Adil. Thank you, Dr. Salik. Both have been great mentors, and it's always a treat to listen to them. Two things I want to bring to the floor. One is that you talked about reorganization of decision-making hierarchy or loop, and you want technical people to be in that decision-making loop to advise the leaders to take correct measures or actions in accordance with these EDTs. But despite that, I feel that unless this political and military leadership, they themselves have hands-on experience in EDTs, it will still be a gap between them and the technical advice to act appropriately. And I don't know how to achieve that. If you have any, the other thing is that I was wondering what the other side thinks of us having EDTs, the Indian side. And I was going through some material and I interestingly found out that the Indians believe that AI and information warfare has more maturity with Pakistan than with India. And this implies that Indians believe that Pakistani content or anything coming out of Pakistan is less factual and is more AI generated. And this hurts the credibility of a nation, of a state. And they are telling the international community also that don't believe in Pakistan because they have more AI generated content than us. So I was just wondering, is having AI in information warfare a good or a bad thing? Thank you.
On the first question, I don't know if Brigadier Salik was able to hear. Admiral Faisal was saying about the reorganization of military, involvement of engineers and software engineers and quantum engineers, etc. But his point is that the decision making at the top, they need to be conversant with how technologies work actually. There is no second opinion about that. But for now, what we have seen, the hierarchy in all the three services, the main fighting forces, they lead. But the way technologies are evolving, there's so many unknowns, how these technologies can be integrated, what kind of weapon system or platforms would come up in the future. I think my contention is that unless you have those experts sitting over there, it would be very, very difficult to take those decisions. Some of the discussions that we have had after this May 25 episode, how this war was fought, yes, we fared reasonably well, but because these technologies were used in not very extensively, some drones, and as Mukesh Salik was also saying, but we are talking about the future warfare where the swarm of drones would be coming. There would be attacks or the attempts from the space. There would be other AI integrated weapon systems. So how to deal with those? The entire concept, our traditional way of war fighting, which is in Pakistan, India case, it is war biased towards land warfare, but future is going to be something completely different. Now, this could be a prediction that may go wrong because we do not know how these technologies are. So your point, yes, whosoever, like Prime Minister doesn't have to be conversant with how AI works, but he has to take that political decision. Are we going to war or not? He's the executive. Likewise, the military commanders, I think, unless they are familiar with these technologies, yes, they would understand, but they wouldn't know the technicalities of these things. And there are many examples in the, especially in United States now, the way their decision making works. So fighter pilot cannot be master of everything. How cyber warfare is being waged by the adversary and what are the potential and what time you need to launch your cyber attack, what things you need to neutralize at a particular moment to cut off the lifeline of the adversary. Likewise, the space-based assets. So I think this has become so complex that वो जो past में होता था एक सिपा सलार आगे से जाके fight करा, that is not going to work. So that is why I'm saying reorganization and the decision making has to be thought through. The second about information warfare, वो अगर ये question में समझ कि जी AI based information warfare, is it good or bad? As long as it is being seen as credible and you are using that AI in a balanced way and the effect is producing favorable result, yes, it is. But beyond that, what we had seen, even in May crisis, one side exaggerating, and there were things that we knew this is not factually correct, something AI generated. You start to lose that credibility. So again, if somebody understands how these technologies work, because this is everything that you're playing with the mind of your adversary. So if you go overboard, everything becomes questionable. But if you're using it selectively and creating that desired impact, yes, it is good. Maybe Salik sir, if you want to add something.
I think, Adil, your point is valid that the senior leadership has to be aware of these technologies. Obviously, they do not have to write the software or they have to know the intricacies of the hardware, but familiarity with the technology is important. And the solution you are suggesting may be good for the interim period, but then for the long term, we have to change our training modules at our military academies, where right at the onset, people are trained in these technologies so that once they rise up the ranks, they are capable of understanding and utilizing these technologies. There are a lot of things happening around which we normally do not see. For instance, the US Marine Corps, they printed the parts of a drone through a 3D printer, assembled it and successfully flew it. And now very recently, the US Secretary of Defense, he showed his unhappiness on the lack of induction of drones in the fighting units in the US Army. And what they are going to now experiment is that wherever any field unit is moving, along with that, there'll be large trucks and trailers which will be moving there, carrying 3D printers. And while they're on the move, they'll be printing those drone parts, and they'll be assembled and in large numbers, and then they will keep producing, assembling, and then keep launching those drones while they're on the move or while they're right on the edge of the battlefield. So these are the kind of two things which are coming up. And what the best we can do is that we can at least keep ourselves abreast with whatever is happening. We do not have those kind of capabilities at the moment. And as I said, with borrowed technologies, we will always be vulnerable. The biggest requirement for the effective use of AI is the database. And we haven't created a database. At the moment, there are only two countries which have access to big databases. One is China and other is United States. So we also have to think about it. If we have to utilize AI, the effectiveness of AI will always be dependent on the data set which is available to support it. So we have to think in that direction as well.
Thank you. Last question, because we are running short of time. From the audience, Arish, you can ask, and then we can lump it with any question from the audience.
About outer space, there was an image in which a missile was headed towards a satellite. As these information and communication technology is highly dependent on satellite systems, so how susceptible is outer space right now to accidents or sabotage, either by state actors or non-state actors?
My name is Hilal Ahmed. I am a journalist. So I have a short question. Why are we space technology? As Pakistan was the leading country in 60s who opted space technology in the region. Thank you.
सर बेसिकली इंडिया जो है हम पे ब्लेम करता है कि वी आर यूजिंग एआई कंटेंट इन इंफॉर्मेशन वॉरफेयर बट इटसेल्फ इंडिया एक्सपोज हुआ है रिसेंटली इंफॉर्मेशन वॉरफेयर यूज़ करने में वेदर इट्स विद म्यांमार बांग्लादेश 2024 का पॉलिटिकल ट्रांजिशन में या म्यांमार के रिसेंटली स्ट्राइक पे पाकिस्तान इंडिया कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में उन्होंने इंफॉर्मेशन वॉरफेयर को एक्सप्लॉइट किया है तो पाकिस्तान why Pakistan is not engaging with smaller South Asian states to counter this narrative? Why we are only engaging in Middle East, EU, United States, UN, and Central Asia? Why not we engaging with the smaller South Asian states to counter India in information warfare?
Yeah, so thank you. Question about space though. लेकिन उससे पहले if you allow, जो मुकेश सालिक ने कहा training का, I'm happy that he raised. US is facing this challenge because traditionally what happens is कि जी आपको fighting force में क्या चाहिए, एक certain height, certain physique के men या women चाहिए होते हैं because they have to fight. Now since these technology, they need cyber warriors, they need AI. So those people, they don't fit in this criteria because traditionally हमने देखा है कि जो cyber वाला है वो shorts में आता है, slippers में आता है, he doesn't want or she doesn't want to be bounded by those physical traits. No? So that's a challenge. How to? So they had to change their selection parameters because future में if you want these people to fight your wars, you have to change the parameter induction का. Something that Air Chief ने जब हमें बाद में brief किया था May के conflict में, since I was not the only one, so means कि वो public and nothing confidential. In our cyberspace, Air Force की जो है, they also did something similar. So they picked people who were brilliant in cyber, working somewhere around Pakistan, और उनको उन्होंने train करके उस पे किया cyber and they delivered. उसमें मेरे जैसा अगर वो होता कि ये एक फाइटर पायलट बेशक मैं कंप्यूटर साइंसेस पढ़ के जो मर्जी कर लेता मेरा एप्टीट्यूड उस तरह से नहीं होना था सो दैट्स व्हाई इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू हैव दीज पीपल विद रिक्वायर्ड क्वालिफिकेशन के फ्यूचर के उसमें नो कमिंग टू स्पेस एसेट्स आर वल्नरेबल That's a big debate जो एक चल रही है कि जी just by the presence of satellites itself creating a hazard कि वो satellites आप पे होंगे लेकिन उसके अलावा anti satellite capabilities now blanketing of adversary satellites और वो जो kidnapping of satellites so you can have those robotic arms displace adversary satellite from one orbit to somewhere else. So those are challenges that people are talking about because some of those countries are developing these capabilities. We having very limited space presence, very limited potential. So it's a big challenge because the adversary has much more capability and it has support of the United States. So if you want to secure your space-based assets, तो आपको इन चीजों पे काम करना पड़ेगा. Not necessarily that you start building anti-satellite weapons, but how to secure your limited space capability, that remains a challenge. Now it links to the जो sir ने सवाल पूछा question, where are we in space? We are nowhere for now. Because just the way the space race is happening, we haven't yet started. And at IRS, I've already made one presentation on space. ISSI में भी मैंने इस तरह बात की थी because that's the future. We started in 61, India started in 62, and where we are, where India is. ठीक है? There are some issues कि जिसको हम वो नहीं कह सकते कि हमारे institutions काम नहीं कर सकते थे. It was about के our priorities changed because at that time we had limited resources. So this leadership said कि we need to build bombs, nuclear weapons, क्योंकि उस वक्त इंडिया ने 1974 की तो आपका जितना भी वो किटी था अगर $100 था तो you focus your resources towards that. The space became a secondary issue. Now we are realizing the way this race is happening और जो उसका implication है commercial जो है इसका मतलब it's going to be $1.8 trillion economy, space economy itself. I'm talking about commercial by 2035 or 2040 जो prediction है. India is aspiring to get a share of 8 to 9%. So just imagine the billions of dollars it will और उनका जो budget अभी जो investment करे they will be able to achieve that. We are जो ओपन सोर्सेज में था प्रॉब्ली $25 million एनुअल जो कहीं से क्योंकि स्पार्को की वेबसाइट पे चीज़ें नहीं हैं वो उसी तरह से लेकिन वेरी लिमिटेड अमाउंट. So if you don't invest in that and you don't bring commercial entities because military का domain नहीं है, India is prospering because उन्होंने commercial side separate किया है जिसकी वजह से they are collaborating with the Western entities. दुनिया आ रही है उनके satellite launch vehicles को use करके अपने satellites करें and they are earning revenue from that. We have developed ballistic missiles. We can develop satellite launch vehicles. लेकिन वो हमारी sensitivity, over sensitivity that if we start working, they will think about कि हम ICBM बना रहे हैं US की तरफ. We have ourselves अपना उसको cap कर दिए capabilities का. Second, we need to have a separate space, civilian space entity because nobody is going to work Sparko US entity list में. कोई आपके साथ काम नहीं, collaboration नहीं करना चाहता. Separate civilian होगी तो you have the technology, at least knowledge तो है ना, know how engineers are they can establish. 61 में once we started within 1 year we were able to launch 2 sounding rockets with the help of NASA. India ने भी start नहीं किया था. So PEC scientists there. So we had this capability. We have this capability. We develop nuclear weapons. It is all matter of prioritizing कि आपने अपने direction किस तरफ लेके जानी चाहिए. तो वो unfortunately अभी तक नहीं हुई है. And this is where we are lacking. On short about InfoWar. अच्छा ये जब मैकेंडस की थ्योरी कर रहा था तो मैं कभी गूगल किया तो एक और भी था कि एनीबडी हु कंट्रोल्स द माइंड विल रूल द पॉपुलेशन. सो ये उसी के हिसाब से था कि जी मीडिया जिसके कंट्रोल में इंफॉर्मेशन वॉर है जिसके है लेकिन आई थिंक इट इज ओवर स्टेटेड और उसकी ओवर स्टेटेड की वजह से हमने ये स्ट्रैटकॉम और ये इंफॉर्मेशन वॉरफेयर और ये मीडिया नैरेटिव्स की बात की है. मीडिया नैरेटिव सेल्स एज लॉन्ग एज कि उसके अंदर सब्सटेंस पे होता है. ठीक है. May 25 India had more resources. Western जो media they were more sympathetic towards India. लेकिन despite being a smaller country with limited resources, why our narrative prevailed? Because something happened on ground which was undeniable. अब कुछ नहीं हुआ होता और आप कहते रहते तो nobody would believe that. Like India, they continue to say कि हमारे कितने जहाज किए और सब कुछ किया. Nobody believed that. तो दैट इज वेयर वी आर प्रॉब्ली गोइंग रॉन्ग कि हमने उसको ओवर एम्फेसाइज करके और अपने मीडिया नैरेटिव्स को इतना इंपॉर्टेंट दे दिया है कि जी सब्सटेंस को हम सेकेंडरी करें. योर क्वेश्चन अबाउट व्हाई वी आर नॉट एंगेजिंग विद सार्क, आई थिंक वो इंफॉर्मेशन वॉरफेयर के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में नहीं है. इट्स मोर अबाउट डिप्लोमेसी, जो एम्बेसडर साहब वो आपके प्रेसिडेंट ज़्यादा करेंगे कि रीजनल कनेक्टिविटी के फायदे कितने होते हैं. एंड इफ यू आर रीजनेबल, यस, लाइक नाउ many of the South Asian countries are feeling that pinch that India as a hegemon, how it can affect their existence. So they are now reaching out to Pakistan, जैसे बांग्लादेश पाकिस्तान के rapprochement और बाकी जो भी smaller countries है. It's more about, not about information warfare, nothing about narrative building. It's more about you reach out to them, engage with them, and the issues that you can work together, because everybody is feeling that India as hegemon is not acceptable. Now, that's the space that you can create and work with your regional countries to promote your own interest, not necessarily to build a front against India. Okay? Thank you.
Salik Sahab, would you like to add to that?
Just a little bit about the Pakistani space program. As has been mentioned, we started off in 1961, but then we lost 3 to 4 decades. What we did was somebody had a bright idea that we put Suparco under the cabinet division. And you can well imagine there was nobody bothered about the development of space there. And the shortage of funds was the second factor. It was only in the early 2000s that once this Suparco was brought at par with the other strategic organizations like Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission, NESCOM and KRL, that it started regaining its lost glory. And since then, they have produced some results as well. But we have to do a lot of catching up. And it's a matter of priorities. And particularly once you have limited resources, you have to prioritize, and depends where your main priority lays. And space probably was not. The only thing we can do is now that we have to open up the space to for the private entities because of the commercial uses of the space. So they will see profitability there, and they will definitely invest, and we can benefit from those developments as well in the public sector.
Thank you. Well, we had a most enlightening session, and the discussion was really focused. Dr. Adel Sultan, Brigadier Salik, and of course, Admiral Faisal also contributed to that, and Anayat Saab here, and many of our other participants and distinguished audience through the comments and questions. I think a range of ideas were brought up and discussed, and that would really help us, because this is a topic which has not been discussed as much in the academic or intellectual circles as the importance it merits. In the coming years, we will see greater significance, and especially in the context of this region, to nuclear powers, a very hostile environment, a region which is considered a nuclear flashpoint, and a great appetite. And that's not all. It's also the involvement of other powers, the big, probably the some of the biggest powers in the world, who are very interested in this region. So I think there's all the elements are there which would see the induction of all these sophisticated technologies in the area of warfare, whether it's hybrid warfare or conventional warfare, and hopefully not nuclear warfare ever. So we would like to have more sessions on this. We'll have, inshallah, a series of sessions. We'll invite our very worthy panelists here, and we will endeavor to add to the panels here with some more experts. So this would be like the first of many more to come, inshallah. So with these words, I would like to thank our dear panelists today for their very, very insightful contribution. And I would like to request you all to join me in a big hand of applause for them.
Thank you, Dr. Salik. Thank you so much.